In this installment of the Analytical Toolbox, I'll be focusing on point of view. This presentation will cover the following terms: point of view and perspective, first-person point of view, second-person point of view, third-person omniscient, third-person limited omniscient, speaker and narrator, the lyric I, and reliable and unreliable narrators. Do you already know about this? Test your knowledge by taking the linked diagnostic quiz. Whether you are reading fiction or poetry, a novel or a play, the perspective from which you are seeing what is being depicted, the point of view, is crucial. But determining the point of view and its effect on how we interpret a literary work can get surprisingly messy. In narratives or stories, events are described, commented upon, and communicated by the narrator. Here is where you get classic forms of first-person, second-person, and third-person narration. By way of review, let's say you have a scene with characters on stage. In first person, the narrator is usually a character on stage and participating in the plot. You, the reader, can see through the narrator's eyes and have access to their thoughts. First-person point of view is dominated by the pronoun I. I think, I said, I saw. You have an interior view of the narrator character, but you aren't able to see into the minds of the other characters. You can only hear them talking and see what they do, just like when you're interacting with people in real life. Here's an example from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. You don't know about me without you've read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth, mainly. There was things which he stretched, but mainly, he told the truth. First person is effective when you really want to dig deep into a single character's mind and see how they view the world. In this particular case, you can also see how first person enables an author to separate themselves from the teller of the story, or vice versa. Twain cleverly uses first person to allow Huck to comment disparagingly, or self-effacingly, depending on your point of view, on Twain's own writing. In second person, the positions of the narrator and the reader are reversed. You, the reader, in effect, are the character on stage, and the narrator is seeing through your eyes and seeing into your head. And you are then reading that narrator's description of what you are doing. When written, second-person narration is dominated by the pronoun you. It's a point of view that frequently feels just as weird as this description sounds. This is from Claudia Rankine's Citizen. The real estate woman, who didn't fathom she could have made an appointment to show her house to you, spends much of the walkthrough telling your friend, repeatedly, how comfortable she feels around her. Neither you nor your friend bothers to ask who is making her feel uncomfortable. Here the reader feels quite viscerally what it is like to be ignored and assumed to be unable to purchase a house, ostensibly because one is black. Not only that, but the presence of that black person also makes the real estate agent feel uncomfortable. For what reason does not need to be stated. But in this example, the reader certainly feels it. Second-person narration is difficult to pull off because the narrator has to convincingly portray what any reader might see or feel in a particular situation. How do you do that for all readers? But some, like Claudia Rankine, do it extremely well. There are two types of third person. The third-person omniscient narrator is like God. They can see everything and see into everyone's heads. You, the reader, see through that godly eye. You would think that this point of view would be used more frequently than it is, but it's actually not used that often. And in third-person limited point of view, the narrator is like a little creature sitting on the shoulder of one of the characters, while you, the reader, are able to see through them. You're able to see what that character sees, but not exactly through their eyes. You're party to the character's thoughts, but not quite within the character's head. The narrator is still an outside observer on the central consciousness and refers to that character as he or she or they, in the third person. Here's an example from the very beginning of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which uses both omniscient and limited third person. Harry Potter was a highly unusual boy in many ways. For one thing, he hated the summer holidays more than any other time of year. For another, he really wanted to do his homework, but was forced to do it in secret, in the dead of night. and he also happened to be a wizard. In this example, third-person omniscient is dominant. Harry would be unlikely to describe himself as a highly unusual boy or to highlight the fact that he is a wizard. These ideas seem to be coming from an outsider perspective, the perspective of an exterior narrator. Large sections of the book, however, do in fact center in Harry's consciousness, and we are party to Harry's thoughts and feelings, but not those of the other characters. Those sections would be more accurately described as being in limited third-person perspective. Here are some good things to know about point of view. Number 1. Perhaps because they most closely replicate the way we individually see the world, first-person and third-person limited point of view are the most frequently used by authors. In both cases, the events of the story are seen through a single character's perspective, just as we see the world through our own eyes only. Number 2. The author and the narrator are not the same. It's easy to see that Huck Finn is not the same as Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens for that matter, but it may be more difficult to distinguish the second-person you in Citizen from Claudia Rankine, or the omniscient narrator in Harry Potter from J.K. Rowling herself. It's important to remember, however, that writers frequently create personas for their narrators, and that these personae can be extremely different from the authors themselves. Number 3. Some literary works will maintain the same perspective throughout the work, but other works will change their point of view from chapter to chapter, or even from paragraph to paragraph. When determining point of view, you can look at the pronouns used, I, you, he or she, but also consider what knowledge you are given access to as a reader. Through whose eyes are you seeing? Whose thoughts are you party to? It's the perspective, not the pronouns, that determine point of view. Finally, number 4, it's important to remember that point of view is largely a concern of fiction. Lyric poetry, whether you're talking about a Shakespeare sonnet or Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, often describes an emotion or an idea rather than telling a story. We have love poems, carpe diem poems, odes to the deceased. So it's not the events that are being narrated, but the act of utterance that is emphasized. Since they don't have a narrative, they are not told by a narrator. Instead, we describe the point of view as coming from the speaker, or the lyric eye. Lyric poetry, with its use of the lyric eye, looks a lot like first-person narration, but keep in mind that it has a very different purpose, to express one's thoughts and emotions, not tell a story. So let's put point of view to work. While point of view and perspective are predominantly the concern of narrative fiction, it is possible to analyze how it works in a variety of genres. The first question is, whose perspective are you given, and whose are withheld? Point of view is a key tool writers use to cultivate sympathy for a character or animosity toward others. Is the narrator reliable or unreliable? When you adopt a character's or narrator's perspective, your view or perception of the situation will be colored by that character's attitudes and prejudices, and we tend to believe their view is truthful, whether they are in fact or not. Does point of view shift within the work? How do those shifts change your perception of what is being depicted? And within lyric poetry, what persona is inhabited by the speaker? Is he passionate, ironic, in love, or in despair? How does this persona also color what is being depicted? Be aware of what the point of view is training you to see. Analyzing point of view can really help you see how a piece of fiction ticks. Have fun with it.